Alright guys, what's up? We're back with episode 2 of me answering questions from r/startups. We got a lot of good feedback from episode 1, so I'm really excited about this one. So let's get started. So first question is by user Mind and Bodies. What is the fastest way to launch an iOS prototype? He says, what's the fastest way I can launch an iOS prototype and put it in the hands of users? Here's what I think my options are. 1. Use low-code or no-code app solutions. 2. Use existing open-source app templates and modify slightly. And 3. Find iOS freelancers on Upwork. And 4. Learn Swift code from scratch and build an MVP. So, assuming you've already gone through the phase of, yes, this is actually what I want to build, and you've gone through the user discovery, and you know that this is just going to be a waste of time, the fastest way to launch an app, in my opinion, is to go through something like a cross-platform framework, such as Ionic or Flutter or something like that, where you can build in one language, but you can also launch in both iOS or Android. So that's super important, and you don't really have to learn a new language if you already know JavaScript. And JavaScript is really is widely used in like web development and stuff like that. Personally, that's really the only coding platform or framework I've used when I create my apps for prototyping and stuff like that. During my first startup, we used Ionic a lot, which I absolutely love and recommend. You can basically do a lot of the native functionalities of like as if you're writing Swift and running on iOS. So unless you're doing something like creating a new game or something like that, you can do pretty much everything on Ionic, and it's I think so much easier than having to learn a new language like Swift. That takes a lot of time, and with Ionic, it's really popular, widely used, so you won't have a problem building your apps with that. So let's talk about some of like the options that you listed. So learning Swift code and building from scratch, building that MVP. We talked a little bit about that, right? Using Ionic and not having to learn a new language if you already know JavaScript. Finding an iOS freelancer on Upwork. This is a good idea if you want to spend. It's going to cost like maybe a few grand just to get this app working, and that's just the MVP. You're going to add new features, you're going to pay more for that. Maybe this freelancer quits, or you have to find someone new because you don't like working with them. Those are all things to take into consideration when finding a freelancer and going through that route. The other option is using existing open source app templates and modifying slightly. So this is kind of like going back to using Ionic or something of like a cross-platform framework, like Flutter is also a good option, or Xamarin. It's good because it'll get you the boilerplates, and it'll help you kickstart your applications. So if you already know code, that's another great way to go about it. You can also do that with Ionic. Using low-code or no-code app solutions. So it obviously depends on the type of application that you're building. The state that those no-code or low-code app applications are at, I don't think they're the best way to go about it, especially when you go past that MVP and you need to build out something more complicated. You want to insert your own custom code into there, it might get a little bit harder and trickier. So that's like what I would do. I would use something like cross-platform application or cross-platform framework like Ionic or Xamarin or Flutter. It really helps you kickstart the process and the development, and I've had really good success with those. And the second question is by user if155. So he asks, or she asks, how do you find co-founders or people to join your team who take you seriously? I love this question, it's a really good one. And so they list that the STEM student here, and so they're in college, I'm assuming, and currently developing a fintech project that I believe will add a lot of value to consumers and businesses. I'm struggling to find like-minded people to join me and develop it together. I think it's because the idea I have is too business-like. There's too much involvement with card issuers and card networkers. Most of the people I know in my cohort only want to work with other established tech companies or be indie game developers. Did most of you want to work in the industry before going to the startup? Any tips, advice, things? So I can actually personally relate to this one really well because the first startup I started in college. It was like around my junior year of college. And I started with a co-founder, and we went on for 2 years, and we raised some money after college to work on it. But let's talk about that first part of that question is how do you find people? How do you find like-minded people, basically co-founders to help you work on this project? So if you're in college, it's the easiest time of your life that you're going to be able to meet people and find new people to work on cool things like this. Now, I'm not saying it'll be like super easy. You still have to go out and do a lot of work and meeting people and going to the right groups. But what I recommend is going to certain clubs or organizations within your college. Maybe they have something like for people who are interested in business or people who are interested in like software engineering, want to build like apps and UIs and stuff like that. It's a great place. Where I've personally found luck is going through like an incubator within your college. So it's basically like people who want to start companies or already started companies, and they're just like in this one big community, and you can reach out to them for help. You can reach out to them if you have a great idea and you need people to work with. So if that isn't already offered at your college, I would honestly try to build that out in your college. I think that's a great way to, meet new people, even if it takes a lot of work on your end. Or, if there's also like Facebook groups, I'm sure, in your college. I'm not sure where you go to. But I know when I was at the University of Maryland, we had a lot of those. So that was really helpful. For me personally, I've met my co-founder just at a bus stop, actually. So I was coming back from like a tennis party, and then he was coming back from bars, and we actually just started talking because I thought what he was talking about was kind of interesting. And then next thing you know, like the next day we had lunch, and then pretty much the rest is history. We started working together for 2 years. We got pretty far, so that was really awesome. But my advice is just go out there, meet people, try a whole bunch of things. You really never know where you meet the right person. Obviously with the pandemic going on, it makes that a lot harder to do. So another way to meet people is also through things like meetup.com. So meetup.com, if you don't already know, is a place to find like meetups. And they're doing a lot of online meetups now because of the pandemic. So you can just hop on one of those and just start talking. And I'm sure you'll find someone eventually. The second part of that question, so, is that like finding the right person? I'm sure you can find people, but finding the right person is also important. So asking the right questions to that person. How would you, how much work are you expecting out of that person? How much work are they expecting out of you? Because you're at the end, being a co-founder or having co-founders is almost like, well, I would compare it to as like getting married. I don't know what that feels like. That's what I would assume. Sometimes you might even have to live together. You're working together for a long time. You're going to spend a lot of your day together, so it's important to find the right person. Asking them the right questions is really important, making sure you get along with them. The other part of that question is, did most of you work in the industry before going into your startup? And I think that varies, right, on your drive and what's important, your, what other things you have going on in life. Maybe you have, after college, you have some student debt and you have to go get a job because you need to pay that off. So it really depends. But if you don't have a lot of those barriers, what I would recommend, honestly, is just to go for it right after college, because that's like the time of your life where you have the least amount of worries and least amount of stress. Because afterwards, then you got to worry. When you're older, you got to worry about, like when you might have kids, or like if you have like a significant other and you get married, and you have a lot more obligations to worry about. So personally, I did not work in the industry before I went to my first startup. I went right after college because we were fortunate enough to raise money, go through an accelerator. That helped a lot, and kickstart a lot of like meeting new people and stuff like that. So that's some of my advice. I'd love to hear what you guys have to think about any of these threads or any of these questions. What your advice would be, where you found success in meeting new people and new co-founders. And as always, remember to like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.